I'm Amelia, and I'm 28 years old. The moment I unlocked the door to my brand new bakery, my phone buzzed with a group chat message that made my hands shake. It was from my brother Marcus, and the text read, "Taking bets on how long before she crawls back begging for a real job. I give it 3 months." Below it, a string of laughing emojis from my entire family. My sister Diane had written, "Generous. I say 6 weeks." My father's response was the knife that twisted deepest. Her desserts? Not even a dog would eat them. I stood there, flour still on my apron from the morning's prep, staring at words that should have destroyed me. Instead, I did something they never expected. I smiled, slipped my phone into my pocket, and opened the door to the biggest success story they would ever witness. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever felt underestimated by the people who should have supported you most, you'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back 6 years, because that's when this whole beautiful disaster started. I was 22, working double shifts at Monroe's Cafe downtown, spending every spare moment in my tiny apartment kitchen perfecting recipes. My hands were permanently stained with vanilla extract. My hair constantly smelled like caramelized sugar, and I had never been happier. Baking wasn't just a hobby for me, it was oxygen. Every perfectly risen croissant, every delicate macaron, every layer cake that came out exactly right felt like proof that I could create something beautiful in a world that constantly told me I wasn't enough. My family had other opinions. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were basically roast Amelia sessions with a side of pot roast. My father, Robert, had owned a struggling hardware store for 30 years before finally closing it down. He liked to consider himself a business expert, which was rich coming from someone whose greatest achievement was managing to lose money selling hammers in a growing suburb. My mother Linda just nodded along to whatever he said, like she had been doing for 3 decades. Marcus, my older brother, had gone into sales after dropping out of college twice. He sold insurance with the kind of aggressive mediocrity that earned him just enough commission to lease a car he couldn't afford and develop an ego that definitely wasn't justified. My sister Diane was a real estate agent who had recently gotten her license and acted like she had personally invented the concept of home ownership. She loved reminding me that she made more in one commission than I made in 6 months slinging coffee. Their favorite hobby? Reminding me that my baking dreams were exactly that. Dreams. Silly, expensive, unrealistic dreams that a grown woman should have abandoned years ago. "When are you going to get serious about your future?" my father would ask every single Sunday like clockwork. My mother would add, "Your cousin Jennifer just made partner at her law firm," as if that had anything to do with me. Marcus would laugh and say something like, "Still playing with your easy bake oven?" And Diane would wrinkle her nose and say, "Don't you think it's time to grow up?" But here's the thing about being constantly underestimated. It either breaks you, or it becomes fuel. For me, it was premium-grade rocket fuel. Every dismissive comment, every condescending laugh, every time they made me feel small, I channeled it into my work. I took every baking class I could afford. I watched endless tutorials. I experimented with flavors and techniques until my fingers ached, and I saved every single penny. Working at Monroe's Cafe taught me more than just how to make a perfect cappuccino. Mrs. Monroe, the owner, was a shrewd businesswoman who had built her small empire from nothing. She saw something in me that my own family never did: talent, drive, potential. She let me sell my own baked goods through the cafe, taking only a small percentage. That's how I built my clientele. That's how I started making real money. My family knew I baked. They knew people bought my desserts. What they didn't know was how much people bought, how my custom cakes were booked out 3 months in advance, how I had a waiting list for my French macarons, how food bloggers were starting to mention me in their posts. I kept that information to myself, locked away like the money I was saving in a separate bank account they knew nothing about. The worst part? They expected free goods constantly. Every birthday, every holiday, every random Tuesday when they decided to throw a barbecue. "Bring some of those cookie things," Marcus would text. Never, "Could you please make cookies?" Or, "We'd love to have your desserts." Just demands. Commands. And God forbid I actually asked to be paid. "You would charge your own family?" My mother had gasped once, clutching her pearls like I had suggested selling organs. "That's shameful, Amelia." So I made them free desserts. Dozens of them over the years. Beautiful cakes, intricate pastries, custom orders that would have cost hundreds of dollars. And you know what they did? They criticized every single one. Too sweet, too dense. The frosting was too much. The filling was too little. Nothing was ever good enough. I did all this work in my own apartment kitchen, spending my own money on ingredients, using my own equipment. They contributed nothing but complaints. The absolute lowest point came 2 years ago at Marcus's engagement party. I had spent 3 days making a 5-tier engagement cake, 5 tiers. Each layer was a different flavor, all of them his favorites. The decoration was flawless, if I do say so myself. White fondant with hand-piped gold details. Real edible flowers. It was a masterpiece. I arrived at the party carefully carrying this creation, only to find a store-bought sheet cake from the grocery store already sitting on the dessert table. "Oh, Emilia," Diane had said, not even trying to hide her smirk. "We weren't sure your cake would be enough for everyone, so we got a backup." A backup? My 5-tier custom cake needed a backup grocery store sheet cake. The message was clear. The humiliation was intentional. I smiled, set my cake down next to the cheap alternative, and watched as guests completely ignored the store-bought option and devoured every crumb of mine. I watched my family's faces as people asked who made the incredible cake. I watched Marcus try to take credit before his fiancée corrected him. It was a small victory, but it was mine. That night, I made a decision. I was going to open my own bakery. Not someday. Not eventually. Soon. And I wasn't going to tell my family a single thing until the day I opened the doors. Last year, I made just over $50,000 selling baked goods from my apartment kitchen while working full-time at the cafe. That money, combined with my savings, would be my foundation. My family thought I was wasting my life. I was actually building an empire, one perfectly baked croissant at a time. The next 18 months were a masterclass in secrecy and strategy. By day, I was still Emilia, the disappointing daughter who served coffee and wasted her time on a silly hobby. By night, I was building an empire. Every Sunday dinner became an intelligence-gathering mission. I listened to my father's uninformed business lectures and learned exactly what not to do. I watched my siblings brag about their mediocre achievements and understood the power of staying quiet until the right moment. I perfected the art of being underestimated. Mrs. Monroe became my unofficial business mentor. She introduced me to her accountant, her lawyer, her suppliers. She taught me about permits and insurance and health inspections. She showed me her books, explaining profit margins and overhead costs and cash flow management. "You're going to be my competition someday," she said once, smiling. "I might as well make sure you do it right." I found the perfect location 6 months into my planning, a corner storefront in the historic district downtown, right where foot traffic was heaviest. The space had been a failed sandwich shop, then a failed boutique, then sat empty for 8 months. Everyone said it was cursed. I saw potential. High ceilings, beautiful original hardwood floors, huge windows that would flood the space with natural light. It was perfect. The rent was steep, but I had done my research. The neighborhood was gentrifying fast. New restaurants were opening. Young professionals were moving in. Coffee shops were popping up on every corner. What they needed was a real bakery, not a cafe that happened to have some pastries. A destination, a place people would drive across town for. I negotiated the lease myself, armed with spreadsheets and market research and a confidence I definitely didn't feel. The landlord, an older man named George, seemed amused by my presentation. "You know the last 3 businesses here failed, right?" he asked. "I do," I replied. "I also know why they failed. Bad concept, poor execution, no understanding of the market. That won't be me." Something in my absolute certainty must have convinced him, because he agreed to a lease with favorable terms. I signed the paperwork on a Tuesday afternoon and didn't tell a single family member. Sunday dinners continued as usual. My family remained blissfully ignorant that I was gutting a commercial space downtown, meeting with contractors, choosing paint colors, interviewing potential employees. My mother asked when I was going to find a nice man to settle down with. My father lectured about fiscal responsibility while living off my mother's inheritance. Marcus bragged about his latest sales numbers. Diane showed off photos of houses she'd sold. And me? I smiled and nodded and counted down the days. The renovations took 4 months. I was there almost every night after my shifts at Monroe's, watching the space transform. Exposed brick walls, vintage light fixtures I'd found at estate sales, a massive display case I'd bought secondhand and restored myself. I painted the walls a soft cream color that made the space feel warm and inviting. I hung local artwork that I could rotate monthly, giving artists exposure while keeping the space fresh. Every detail mattered. Every choice was intentional. I hired 2 employees. Sophie, who had worked with me at Monroe's and was the only person outside Mrs. Monroe who knew about my plans. And James, a recent culinary school graduate who needed experience and was willing to work for slightly less than market rate in exchange for creative freedom. Both of them believed in what I was building. Both of them showed up every day, ready to work. Neither of them was related to me, which was honestly refreshing. The equipment was the biggest expense. Commercial-grade ovens, a professional mixer, proper refrigeration, display warmers. I couldn't cut corners on the tools of my trade. I maxed out my savings and took out a small business loan, triple checking every number, making sure I could handle the payments even in a worst-case scenario. My father's failed hardware store had taught me one valuable lesson: hope for the best, plan for the worst. 3 months before the planned opening, I started building buzz. I created social media accounts and started posting behind-the-scenes content, photos of the renovation, sneak peeks of recipes, countdowns to opening day. I reached out to local food bloggers and offered them exclusive tastings. I partnered with other local businesses for cross-promotion. I did everything I could think of to ensure that opening day wouldn't be a silent, empty disaster. My family remained completely oblivious. They were too busy with their own lives to notice that I was rarely available anymore, too self-absorbed to question why I seemed tired at Sunday dinners, too convinced of my inevitable failure to imagine I might actually succeed. Their blindness was my advantage. I kept screenshots of some particularly cruel messages, not out of vindictiveness, but as private motivation, reminders of what I was proving wrong. 2 months before opening, the online chatter about my upcoming bakery started growing. Local food enthusiasts were genuinely excited. I was getting tagged in posts. People were asking questions. The anticipation was building exactly as I had hoped. My family still had no idea what was coming, and I intended to keep it that way until the very last moment. 2 months before opening day, my family discovered I had been wasting money on a commercial space. Not because I told them, because Diane happened to drive past my storefront and recognized my car parked outside. She called my mother immediately. My mother called my father. My father called an emergency family dinner. And just like that, I was summoned to explain myself. I showed up to my parents' house that Sunday knowing exactly what was waiting for me. The entire family was there, sitting in the living room like some kind of intervention committee. Marcus was sprawled on the couch looking smug. Diane sat with her arms crossed, radiating disapproval. My parents were on their matching recliners, presenting a united front of disappointment. "Sit down, Amelia," my father said, pointing to the chair they'd positioned in the center of the room, literally in the center, like I was on trial. I sat. "Diane tells us you've rented a commercial space," my mother began, her voice tight. "Please tell me that's not true." "It's true," I said simply. The room erupted. My father launched into a lecture about financial irresponsibility. My mother wrung her hands and worried aloud about what the neighbors would think. Marcus laughed and said I was delusional. Diane kept asking how I could be so stupid. I let them go on for a full 5 minutes before I spoke. "I'm opening a bakery." "With what money?" my father demanded. "My money," I replied. 6 years of savings, plus a small business loan I qualified for based on my revenue from selling through Monroe's Cafe. "Revenue?" Marcus snorted. "You make cupcakes in your apartment." "I made over $50,000 last year selling baked goods," I said calmly. "I've already paid off the renovation. The equipment is financed. I've hired staff. I've built a customer base. This isn't a whim, it's a business." The silence that followed was delicious. My father's mouth was actually hanging open. Diane looked like she'd been slapped. Marcus sat up straight, his smugness evaporating. My mother just blinked at me, processing. "You're lying," my father finally said. "I have tax returns if you'd like to see them," I offered. I didn't, of course. I would never show them my financial information. But the bluff worked. He sat back, speechless. "This is going to fail." Diane recovered first, her voice sharp. "Do you know how many small businesses fail in the first year?" 70%. 80% actually, I corrected. "I've done the research. I know the risks. I'm prepared for them." "You're not prepared for anything," my father said, finding his voice. "You don't know the first thing about running a business." "Unlike your hardware store, you mean?" I asked sweetly. "The one that lost money for years before you finally gave up?" That probably wasn't fair. Actually, it definitely wasn't fair. But I was so tired of being talked down to by a man whose greatest business achievement was knowing when to quit. My father's face went red. My mother gasped. Marcus looked delighted at the drama. Diane leaned forward, ready to pile on. "Here's what's going to happen," my father said, his voice low and angry. "You're going to cancel that lease. You're going to return whatever equipment you can. You're going to accept that this fantasy is over and find a real job. Like an adult." "No," I said. Just that. Just no. "Excuse me?" I said no. "I'm 28 years old. I'm financially independent. I've built this business with my own money, my own work, my own time. You don't get a say in what I do with my life." The argument continued for another hour. They tried guilt. They tried fear. They tried claiming they were just looking out for me. They tried everything except actually supporting me. Finally, I stood up. "I'm opening Sweet Amelia's Bakery on October 15th, I said. "You're all invited to the grand opening. I hope you'll come." "We won't be there," my father said firmly. That's your choice, I replied, and walked out. I cried in my car for 20 minutes. Not because I was hurt, though I was, but because I knew, deep in my bones, that I had just burned a bridge. There would be no going back from this. No matter what happened with the bakery, my relationship with my family had fundamentally changed. And honestly, I was okay with that. Better than okay. I was free. The group chat exploded that night. I could see the notifications piling up, though I had learned to check it sparingly. The messages were predictable. Discussions about my delusions and inevitable failure, my father refusing to engage in their speculation, but making his disappointment clear. My mother caught between defending me weakly and agreeing with everyone else. Diane was the harshest, as always. Marcus seemed almost excited by the drama. I didn't respond. I just muted the notifications again and went back to my preparations. The final 2 months before opening were a blur of final preparations, inspection appointments, and mounting excitement. The local food blog Taste of the Town did a feature on upcoming restaurants, and Sweet Amelia's Bakery was included. The article had photos of the space, quotes from me about my vision, and enough detail to create serious buzz. The day it posted, my phone exploded with messages from people I hadn't talked to in years. Everyone wanted to know when I was opening. Everyone wanted to be there. Everyone except my family, who were probably too focused on their predictions of failure to notice. 3 days before the grand opening, I sent out formal invitations to everyone I knew. Friends, former teachers, regular customers from Monroe's, local business owners, and yes, my family. I sent each family member a beautifully designed invitation with the date, time, and address. The message was simple. Join me in celebrating the grand opening of Sweet Amelia's Bakery. October 15th, 10 a.m. I can't wait to share this dream with you. Not one of them responded, not even to say they weren't coming. Just silence. I knew what that meant. On the day I opened my dream bakery, my family would be nowhere to be found. October 15th dawned cold and clear, one of those perfect autumn mornings that felt like a blessing. I arrived at the bakery at 4 a.m., unable to sleep anyway, and immediately threw myself into work. Sophie and James arrived by 5, and together we started bringing our carefully planned menu to life. Croissants that had been proofing overnight went into the oven, filling the space with that unmistakable butter and yeast aroma. Fruit tarts were assembled with precision, cakes were frosted, cookies were displayed. By 8 a.m., Sweet Amelia's Bakery looked like something out of a magazine. I had tried not to think about my family. I really had. But around 9, with an hour until opening, I caught myself checking my phone. No messages. I looked out the window, half expecting to see my mother's car pulling up. Nothing. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't need them. I almost believed it. At 9:30, my phone buzzed. Finally. I grabbed it, hoping against hope. It was the family group chat. The messages were casual, discussing their plans for the day. Weekend errands, lunch plans. Not a single mention of my opening. They weren't just choosing not to come. They were choosing to pretend this day didn't exist at all. The deliberate silence was louder than any insult. I stood there, phone in hand, reading their cheerful messages about mundane weekend activities, and something inside me just broke. Not in a devastating way, in a clarifying way. This was who they were. This was who they had always been, and I was done waiting for them to be different. I put my phone away, took a deep breath, and looked around my beautiful bakery. Sophie was adjusting the window display. James was doing final quality checks on everything in the kitchen. The morning light was streaming through those big windows I had loved from the beginning, and outside, a line was forming, an actual line of people waiting for me to open. At exactly 10 a.m., I unlocked the front door. The first customer was Mrs. Morrison, who had been buying my custom birthday cakes for 3 years. Behind her was David, a food blogger who had been hyping the opening for weeks. Behind them were at least 20 more people, all smiling, all excited, all there for me. The first hour was chaos. Beautiful, overwhelming, profitable chaos. People kept coming. The line wrapped around the block. Every single item we had prepared was selling. Customers were taking photos and posting them on social media immediately. Within an hour, we were trending locally. By noon, we had sold out of croissants and had a waiting list for custom orders. Mrs. Monroe showed up around 11, beaming with pride. "I knew you would do it," she said, hugging me tight. I absolutely knew it. Local business owners stopped by to welcome me to the neighborhood. The mayor's office sent flowers. A reporter from the local newspaper asked for an interview right there on the spot. It was everything I had dreamed of and more. It was validation. It was success. It was proof that I had been right all along. Around 2 p.m., as the initial rush was finally slowing down, my phone started buzzing. Multiple calls, multiple texts. all from family members. I ignored them all, busy with customers, busy with this incredible day I was having. Finally, around 3, during a brief lull, I checked the messages. My father: "We need to talk about the business." My mother: "Please call me, it's important." Marcus: "Okay, maybe I misjudged this. Call me." Diane: "We should meet. ASAP." The business. Not my business. The business. As if it were already theirs. This morning, they couldn't even acknowledge my opening existed. Now, after seeing the lines and the social media buzz and the clear signs of success, suddenly they wanted to talk. I didn't respond. Instead, I went back to work, serving customers who actually appreciated what I had built. The rest of the day flew by in a blur of sales and compliments and sheer exhaustion. By the time we locked the doors at 6 p.m., we had made more money in 8 hours than I had dared to project for an entire week. The shelves were nearly bare. The order book was full. And I was absolutely, completely, perfectly vindicated. Sophie and James stayed late to help me clean up and restock for tomorrow. We worked in comfortable silence, occasionally breaking into laughter about some moment from the day. Around 8, as they were leaving, James turned to me and said, "Your family didn't show up today, did they?" I shook my head. "Their loss," Sophie said firmly. "Absolutely their loss." After they left, I sat alone in my bakery, in the space I had built with my own hands and my own vision, and I allowed myself to feel everything: the hurt, the anger, the triumph, the joy, all of it. Tomorrow, I would deal with my family's sudden interest. Tonight, I just wanted to sit in my achievement and savor it. The next morning, I arrived at the bakery to find my father waiting outside. It was barely 6:30 a.m., and I could tell from his appearance that he had been there for a while, trying different times to catch me. Coffee cups littered the bench beside him. The man who never woke up before 9 had clearly made several attempts to figure out my schedule. I considered pretending I didn't see him and going in through the back entrance. Instead, I walked right up to him. "We're not open until 8, I said, unlocking the door. "I'm not here as a customer," he replied, following me inside. "I'm here as your father." I turned on the lights and started my opening routine, letting him stand there while I moved around the space. Finally, he spoke. "Amelia, I owe you an apology." I paused, genuinely surprised. My father wasn't the apologizing type. "I didn't believe in you," he continued. "I was wrong. This place is incredible. The success you had yesterday was remarkable. You've proven yourself." "Thank you," I said carefully, waiting for the other shoe to drop, which is why I think it's time we had a serious conversation about the future of this business. There it was. "The future of this business is already planned," I said. "I have projections, expansion ideas, marketing strategies." "I'm sure you do," he said, in that tone that suggested he thought my plans were adorable, but ultimately inadequate. "But you need real business guidance, family support, structure." "I have all of those things," I replied. "Not the kind of support I'm talking about. Amelia, this could be so much bigger than just a little neighborhood bakery. With the right management, the right expansion strategy, the right family investment, we could turn this into a real empire." I set down the tray I was holding and gave him my full attention. "When you say we, who exactly do you mean?" "The family." "Of course. Marcus has sales experience. Diane understands real estate and expansion. Your mother could handle the books. I could provide overall strategic guidance. Together, we could take your talent and turn it into something truly special." The audacity was breathtaking. "Let me make sure I understand," I said slowly. "Yesterday, you couldn't even acknowledge that this day existed. You didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up. You've spent years telling me this was a waste of time. You've mocked me, dismissed me, and questioned every decision I've made. And now, less than 24 hours after you saw that I might actually succeed, you want to make this a family business? Don't be dramatic," he said. "We were giving you space to prove yourself. Now that you have, it's time to be practical. You can't do this alone." "I'm not alone. I have employees. I have mentors. I have a solid business plan. What I don't have is any reason to involve a family that has never supported me." "We're your family," he said, as if that should settle everything. "Exactly," I replied. "You're my family. You should have been there yesterday. You should have been there for the last 6 years. You weren't. And now you don't get to swoop in and take credit. Take control. Take what I built. We want to help you succeed," he insisted. "No," I said firmly. "You want to benefit from my success. There's a difference." His expression hardened. "You're being stubborn and short-sighted. This attitude will limit how far you can go." "Maybe," I acknowledged, "but at least I'll go there on my own terms. I appreciate you coming by, Dad. But my answer is no. This is my business. Mine alone." He stood there for a long moment, clearly not used to being dismissed. "You're making a mistake." It won't be my first, I said, but it also won't be yours to fix. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a bakery to open. He left without another word, and I went back to my prep work, hands shaking slightly. That was just the opening salvo. I knew my family well enough to know they wouldn't give up that easily. I was right. Over the next week, the campaign intensified. My mother showed up on Tuesday, tearful, talking about family unity and how much it hurt her to see us divided. I could see genuine conflict in her eyes, the pull between supporting her husband and wanting a relationship with me. But in the end, she chose them. Marcus came by Wednesday with a business proposal that was basically him getting an executive position for doing nothing. Diane sent emails about expansion opportunities that all somehow involved her making commission. They tag-teamed me, each approaching from a different angle, all with the same goal: get a piece of my success. What they didn't know was that their coordinated campaign was having the opposite effect. Every visit, every phone call, every attempt to guilt me or manipulate me or convince me just made me more certain that I had made the right decision. They didn't want to support me. They wanted to use me, and I was done being used. On Friday, exactly 1 week after opening, they made their final move. All of them showed up together. My parents, my siblings, even a few aunts and uncles they had recruited. They walked into my bakery during the lunch rush, making a scene, demanding a family meeting right then and there. I looked at them, then at my line of customers, then back at them. "We're busy," I said calmly. "This can't wait," my father insisted. "We need to settle this now." I considered my options. I could throw them out. I could cause a scene. I could let them disrupt my business. Or I could end this once and for all, publicly and definitively. "Fine," I said. "Sophie, can you handle the register? James, keep the production going. I'll be in the back room." I led my family to my small office, barely big enough to fit all of them. They crowded in, and I could feel the pressure of their collective expectation. This was supposed to be the moment I cracked, the moment I gave in. "Emilia," my mother began, "we've talked, and we've come up with a proposal that we think is fair for everyone. Your father would take over strategic planning. Marcus would handle sales and marketing. Diane would manage expansion and new locations. I would manage finances. You would continue doing what you do best, baking, while we handle the business side." "And what would I get in return?" I asked. 20% of profits," my father said. "The rest would be divided among the family based on contribution. It's a fair distribution considering the work we'd all be putting in. 20% of my own business, that I built. With my money, my work, my vision." I looked at each of them. My father, so certain of his authority. My mother, conflicted but still standing with them. Marcus and Diane, already counting their future earnings. And I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity was just too much. "Something funny?" my father asked, his voice cold. I wiped my eyes, getting my laughter under control. "You want me to give you 80% of my business?" I said. "The business you all spent years telling me would fail? The business none of you believed in? The business you didn't even show up to support on opening day? And you think that's fair?" "We're offering our expertise," Diane said. "I have expertise. I have employees. I have everything I need." "You're being selfish," my mother said softly, and I could see the pain in her eyes. She genuinely seemed to believe this was about family unity, not greed. Families help each other. "You're right," I agreed. "Families do help each other. Families show up. Families support each other's dreams. So tell me, where was my family when I needed help?" "We're here now," Marcus said. "Now that there's money to be made," I countered. "That's not fair," my mother protested. "Isn't it? Let me ask you something, Mom. When Marcus needed money for his new car, did he have to give you a percentage of his future earnings? When Diane wanted money for her real estate license, did she have to sign over control of her career? When Dad needed help, did anyone demand equity in his life?" The silence told me everything. "This family has never asked anyone to give up their independence," I continued. "Except me. Because you think I'm weak. You think I need you. You think I can't do this alone. You're wrong. We're trying to help you," my father said. "No, you're trying to help yourselves, and I'm done letting you. If you do this," my father's voice dropped to that threatening tone he used when he was really angry. "If you reject this family, there will be consequences. We won't be there when you fail. And you will fail, Emilia. No one succeeds alone. Maybe you're right," I said. "Maybe I will fail. But at least it will be my failure, my mistake, my lesson to learn. Just like this success is mine. I built this. Me. Not the family, not you. Me. And that's how it's going to stay." I opened the office door, a clear dismissal. "Thank you for coming. Don't let the door hit you on your way out." They didn't move. They stood there, shocked that I had actually said no, that I had chosen my business over their demands. My father looked like he wanted to say something else, but I cut him off. I have customers waiting. I need to get back to work. You can see yourselves out. One by one, they filed out. Diane looked angry. Diane. Marcus looked stunned. My mother looked heartbroken, tears in her eyes. My father looked like he was already planning his next move. I watched them leave, then took a deep breath and went back to work. Sophie gave me a concerned look, but I shook my head. Not now. Later. The rest of the day passed in a strange blur. I went through the motions, serving customers, making small talk, acting like my world hadn't just fundamentally shifted, but it had. I had just drawn a line in the sand with my family. There was no going back from this. That night, after closing, I sat in my office and finally let myself process everything. My phone was full of messages, angry texts from my father about my ingratitude, hurt messages from my mother about family loyalty, accusations from my siblings about my selfishness, and one message from a number I didn't recognize. Saw what happened today. Proud of you. Stay strong. Mrs. Monroe. I smiled. At least someone understood. The next morning, I woke up to find that someone had vandalized my bakery's front window. Nothing major, just some spray paint. The words were clear, though. Family traitor. I stood there, looking at the graffiti, and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was war. I took photos, filed a police report, and called a cleaning service. By the time the bakery opened, you would never know anything had happened. The police officer who took the report was sympathetic but realistic. Without witnesses or security footage, these cases are hard to solve, he explained. But we'll keep an eye out. I nodded, already knowing I would handle this my own way. The attacks became more sophisticated after that. Someone left a 1-star review online claiming food poisoning, completely fabricated. I had it removed, but not before it had been shared. Someone called the health inspector with an anonymous tip about violations. The inspection was thorough and found nothing, but it was clearly harassment. Someone even tried to poach Sophie, offering her more money to work for a competitor that didn't exist yet. They were trying to break me, to prove that I couldn't do this without them. What they didn't understand was that every attack just made me more determined. I documented everything, every vandalism attempt, every fake review, every suspicious incident. I kept records, took screenshots, filed reports. If they wanted to play dirty, I would be prepared. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I got a visit from a lawyer. Not my lawyer, my father's lawyer. He handed me papers. They were attempting to sue me, claiming that because I had received emotional and financial support from them over the years, they deserved compensation for their contribution to my success. It was ridiculous, baseless. It would never hold up in court. But it was expensive to fight. I called my own lawyer, the one Mrs. Monroe had recommended. She listened to everything, reviewed the documents, and started laughing. "This is the most desperate thing I've seen in years," she said. "They have no case. None. But they know that fighting it will cost you money and time. They're banking on you settling just to make it go away." "I'm not settling," I said firmly. "Good," she replied, "because I'm going to absolutely destroy this case. Pro bono. Consider it my investment in karma." The lawsuit was thrown out in less than a month. The judge actually admonished my father's lawyer for wasting the court's time. But the damage was done. The stress, the distraction, the clear message that my family would stop at nothing to either control me or destroy me. I was exhausted, but I wasn't broken, not even close. Sweet Amelia's bakery continued to thrive despite, or maybe because of, all the drama. People rallied around me. Customers became fierce defenders. Local business owners offered support. The community had my back in a way my family never had. And through it all, I kept baking. Because that was what I did. That was who I was. And no amount of family drama was going to change that. But I knew this wasn't over. My family didn't give up easily. They were regrouping, planning their next move, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. 8 months after opening, Sweet Amelia's Bakery had become a legitimate success story. We had been featured in 3 major food publications. Our social media following had grown to over 50,000. I had hired 2 more employees and promoted Sophie to assistant manager. The bank had approved my expansion loan without hesitation. Everything was going exactly according to plan, which meant my family was getting desperate. The first sign was Marcus showing up with a business card for a marketing consultant he swore could triple my revenue. The consultant turned out to be Marcus himself under a fake company name. I handed the card back and told him I already had a marketing strategy that was working perfectly, thank you very much. The look on his face when I called him out was worth every awkward family dinner I'd ever endured. Diane tried next, showing me incredible real estate opportunities for a second location. Every single property she showed me was either wildly overpriced, in a terrible location, or both. When I pointed this out, she got defensive and accused me of being ungrateful for her help. Help that I never asked for, by the way. I told her if I needed real estate assistance, I would hire an actual professional. She stormed out, nearly knocking over a display of macarons on her way. My mother took a different approach. She started coming by the bakery every week, sitting in the corner with her book club friends, ordering the cheapest items on the menu, and loudly discussing how worried she was about me. "She works so hard," I heard her tell her friends one afternoon. "I'm afraid she's going to burn out. She never had good judgment about her limits." I walked over with a bright smile and offered them a free dessert sampler. "On the house," I said sweetly, "since you're all so concerned about my well-being." The passive-aggressive energy at that table could have powered the city, but it was my father's strategy that actually caught me off guard. He started spreading rumors in the business community. Nothing provable, nothing I could sue him for, just whispers, questions about my loan, suggestions that my success was built on family money I had stolen, implications that the bakery was a front for something less legitimate. Suddenly, potential business partnerships were falling through. Networking events got awkward. People who had been friendly started treating me with suspicion. I found out about it from George, my landlord. He pulled me aside one morning and said, "I've been hearing some strange things about you. Amelia, I don't believe them, but I thought you should know people are talking." He told me everything. The rumors, the source, the damage it was doing to my reputation. I thanked him, went back to my office, and had exactly 5 minutes of pure rage before I got myself under control. Then I started planning my response. If my family wanted to play the reputation game, I would show them how it was really done. I reached out to every journalist who had featured the bakery. I contacted local business associations. I arranged speaking engagements at entrepreneurship events. I became aggressively visible, telling my story everywhere I could. The story of a woman who built a successful business from nothing despite her family's opposition. People loved it. The underdog narrative, the self-made success, the family drama just made it more compelling. Within 2 weeks, the narrative had completely flipped. My father's rumors were drowned out by a wave of positive press. Local news did a feature on me. A national baking magazine wanted an interview. A popular podcast asked me to be a guest. I wasn't just a local bakery owner anymore. I was becoming a brand, and my family absolutely hated it. Sophie noticed the change in me around this time. "You seem different," she said one evening as we were closing up. "More confident. Like you've finally stopped waiting for permission to be successful." She was right. I had spent so much of my life seeking my family's approval, afraid of their judgment, trying to prove myself worthy. Now I realized I didn't need their approval. I never had. The only person I needed to prove anything to was myself, and I had already done that. James, meanwhile, was becoming an invaluable asset in the kitchen, developing new recipes and maintaining quality control standards that exceeded even my expectations. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to expand, not just a second location, but a whole new business model. A central production facility that could supply multiple retail locations, wholesale to other cafes and restaurants, and handle the growing demand for shipping orders nationwide. It was ambitious, it was risky, and it was absolutely necessary. I brought in a real business consultant, not my brother in a fake mustache. She reviewed my numbers, my growth trajectory, my market position, and confirmed what I already knew. I had the foundation for something much bigger than a single bakery. We spent 3 weeks developing a comprehensive expansion plan, production facility first to establish capacity, then new retail locations over the following months. The timeline was aggressive but achievable. The loan process was more complex this time. Bigger money, more scrutiny, more risk, but my track record spoke for itself. 8 months of solid profits, impeccable financial management, a growing brand with serious market presence. The bank approved a loan that made my first one look like pocket change. I signed the papers and allowed myself exactly 10 minutes of terror before getting back to work. Finding the right production facility took 3 months. I needed space, proper zoning, room for expansion, and a location that made logistical sense. I found it in a warehouse district that was slowly being revitalized. The building was massive, old, but structurally sound. It needed work, but I could see the potential. High ceilings for industrial ovens, loading docks for deliveries and shipments, office space for administrative staff. It was perfect. The renovations were extensive and took 6 months. I hired a contractor I trusted, learned from my first build-out, and stayed involved in every decision. Commercial kitchen equipment on a scale I had never worked with before. temperature-controlled storage, packaging stations, quality control areas. I was building a real operation, and the scope of it was both thrilling and terrifying. During this time, I barely slept. I was running the original bakery, overseeing the production facility build-out, developing plans for new locations, and trying to maintain the quality that had made me successful in the first place. Sophie essentially ran the day-to-day bakery operations while I focused on expansion. James took on more responsibility in recipe development and training new staff. I promoted them both and gave them equity stakes in the company. They had earned it. And unlike my family, they had actually been there from the beginning. My family noticed the construction permits. Diane, who apparently still stalked public records looking for information about me, discovered the production facility lease. They thought I was failing. They thought I was overextending. They thought this was the beginning of my inevitable collapse. They were so focused on their narrative of my failure that they couldn't see the reality of my success. My father tried one more intervention. He showed up at the construction site one morning, looking official. "Amelia, we need to talk about your expansion plans," he said. "These plans are reckless. You're going to destroy everything you've built." "Thank you for your concern," I replied, not stopping my inspection of the electrical work. "But I have professional consultants, financial advisors, and a solid business plan. I don't need your input." "You're being stubborn," he insisted. "You're repeating the same mistakes I made with the hardware store. Expanding too fast, taking on too much debt, assuming success will continue forever." I stopped and looked at him directly. "You're right about one thing. I don't want to repeat mistakes. That's why I'm not listening to people who confuse their own failures with universal wisdom. That's the mistake I'm correcting right now by asking you to leave." He didn't leave. He followed me around the facility, lecturing about risk management and fiscal responsibility and family loyalty. Finally, I called the police. Watching my father be escorted off my property by officers was one of those moments I would replay in my mind forever. Not because it made me happy, exactly, but because it was the clearest possible symbol of how much had changed. He had no power here, no authority, no influence. This was my world, and he was just a trespasser. The production facility opened 17 months after the original bakery. The opening wasn't public, just a soft launch to test systems and work out problems. But word got around. Local businesses were excited about wholesale options. Cafes and restaurants wanted to carry my products. Corporate clients wanted bulk orders for events. The demand was overwhelming in the best possible way. I hired 12 employees for the production facility initially, growing to 25 within a few months as operations expanded. Each one was carefully selected, trained, and integrated into the company culture I was building. Quality above everything. Attention to detail. Pride in the work. They got it. They believed in it. They made it real every single day. The first new retail location opened 20 months after the original bakery. I chose a spot in an upscale shopping district across town, deliberately targeting a different demographic. The design was similar to the original but elevated, more polished, more sophisticated. It was a success from day one. The second location followed 4 months later in a busy business district, designed for grab-and-go professionals. Also an immediate success. 18 months into my business journey, I had 2 retail locations, a thriving production facility with 25 employees, wholesale contracts with a dozen businesses, and was shipping orders to customers in 15 states. Revenue had exceeded my most optimistic projections. Success on that scale comes with attention, and attention brings all kinds of people out of the woodwork, including family members who suddenly remembered how much they loved me. The first peace offering came from my mother. She sent flowers to the original bakery with a card that read, "So proud of you. Love, Mom." No acknowledgement of the past year, no apology, just a generic expression of pride that felt hollow and calculated. I sent a thank you note because I was raised with manners, but I didn't call. I didn't invite reconciliation. I just acknowledged the gesture and moved on. Marcus tried a different approach. He showed up at my apartment one evening with Chinese takeout and an apology. "I was wrong," he said, sitting on my couch like we were still close. "I didn't believe in you and I should have. I'm sorry." It sounded genuine. It almost was genuine. But then he transitioned smoothly into his real agenda. "I've been thinking about your marketing strategy. I have some ideas that could really take things to the next level." I let him talk for 10 minutes, laying out his vision for my company's marketing, before I interrupted. "Marcus, I appreciate the apology, but I have a full marketing department now. I don't need your ideas." He looked hurt. Actually hurt. "I'm trying to help," he said. "I'm trying to be supportive." "Where was this support 18 months ago?" I asked. "Where was it when I was building this from nothing? You're not here because you want to support me. You're here because you want a piece of what I've built." He denied it, of course. got defensive, accused me of holding grudges. But eventually he left, takeout containers and all, and I was alone again. Diane's approach was more business-focused. She sent a formal proposal for a partnership. She would handle all real estate for future expansions in exchange for a commission structure and equity stake. The proposal was actually well-written and professionally presented. It was also completely unnecessary. I already had a commercial real estate agent who had successfully helped me find and negotiate multiple locations. I replied with a professional email declining the partnership and wishing her well in her real estate career. She responded with a scathing message about family loyalty and missed opportunities. I didn't reply to that one. My father's attempt at reconciliation was the most elaborate. He arranged a family dinner at an expensive restaurant, invited me with a formal written invitation, and made it clear that everyone would be there. The invitation emphasized that this was about moving forward, healing old wounds, and reuniting the family. It was emotionally manipulative and transparent, but I'll admit I was curious. I showed up at the restaurant dressed professionally, prepared for anything. The whole family was there, sitting at a large round table, all smiling at me like the past 18 months hadn't happened. "Amelia," my mother said, standing to hug me, "we've missed you so much." I let her hug me but didn't return it with any real warmth. I sat down and waited to see what this was really about. My father stood, clearing his throat like he was about to give a speech. "Here we go. Amelia, we owe you an apology," he began. "We didn't support you when we should have. We didn't believe in you when we should have. We allowed pride and stubbornness to damage our relationship. For that, we are truly sorry." It was a good speech, practiced, sincere sounding. The whole family nodded along, adding their own apologies and expressions of regret. I listened without interrupting, waiting for the real agenda to emerge. "We want to make things right," my father continued. "We want to be a family again, and we want to support your success in whatever way we can." There it was. "What exactly did you have in mind?" I asked. My mother jumped in. "We know you're expanding rapidly. That kind of growth requires family support, trust, people who have your best interests at heart. We've put together a proposal," Diane added, sliding a folder across the table. "A family investment structure that would provide additional capital for expansion while giving everyone a stake in your success." I opened the folder. It was detailed, professional, clearly prepared by an actual lawyer or financial advisor. They wanted to invest $500,000, raised by selling some family properties and bringing in outside investors they knew, in exchange for 40% equity and board seats for my father and Marcus. It was structured to look generous, like they were helping me, but I saw what it really was. A takeover attempt disguised as family reconciliation. I closed the folder and looked at each of them. They were all watching me with hopeful expressions, waiting for me to be grateful, waiting for me to accept, waiting for me to finally let them in. "No," I said simply. The smiles faltered. "Amelia, you didn't even consider it," my father said. "I don't need to. I don't want your money. I don't want your involvement. I don't want to pretend the past 18 months didn't happen just because you've decided it's now profitable to support me. We're offering you a substantial investment," Marcus said. "I already have investors. Real investors who believed in me before I was successful, who took risks on me when you were hoping I'd fail. This is family," my mother said, her voice trembling. "This should mean something." "It should," I agreed. "But you made it very clear what family meant to you. And now you don't get to rewrite that history just because the ending didn't go the way you planned." The dinner deteriorated quickly after that. Accusations, guilt trips, anger. They cycled through every manipulation tactic they had. But I had grown beyond their influence. Their words couldn't touch me anymore. I stood up, placed my napkin on the table, and prepared to leave. "Thank you for dinner," I said. "And for the clarity. I needed this reminder of exactly why I built my life without you." 2 years after opening my first bakery, I received a call that changed everything. It was from a corporate acquisitions firm representing a major national food conglomerate. They wanted to discuss Sweet Amelia's bakery. The interest was serious, the opportunity was real, and the implications were massive. I took the meeting out of curiosity more than genuine interest. The executives were polished and professional, presenting detailed analyses of my business model, growth trajectory, and market position. They had done their homework. They knew exactly what they were looking at. "We see Sweet Amelia's as the foundation for a nationwide expansion," the lead executive explained. "Your brand resonates. Your quality is consistent. Your story is compelling. We want to scale this to every major market in the country." It was flattering. It was validating. It was everything I had worked for, being recognized and valued by major players in the industry. But something didn't sit right. What happens to me in this scenario? I asked. You would stay on as a brand ambassador, they explained. Public appearances, recipe development, strategic input, but day-to-day operations would be handled by our management team. So I would sell my company and then work for you while you run it? In simplified terms, yes. I asked for time to consider. They gave me 2 weeks. I went home, pulled out my financial projections, and ran the numbers. The offer was more than fair. It was generous. I could take the money, step away, and live comfortably for the rest of my life. I could start something new. I could travel. I could do anything I wanted. But would I still be me without this business I had built? I called Mrs. Monroe for advice. She had been my constant supporter throughout this journey, offering wisdom when I needed it most. She listened to everything and then asked me a simple question. Do you want to sell? I sat with that question for a long moment. No, I finally said. I don't. This is mine. I built it. I'm not ready to let it go. Then don't, she said simply. But there might be a middle ground worth exploring. That conversation led me to my lawyer and a very different kind of negotiation. I went back to the acquisition firm with a counteroffer. I wouldn't sell, but I would license my brand and recipes for a franchising agreement. They would get access to everything they wanted, but I would retain ownership and control. They would pay royalties. I would maintain final approval on all brand decisions. We would grow together, but on my terms. The negotiations took 6 weeks. Back and forth, concessions on both sides, legal teams earning their money. But eventually, we reached an agreement. A franchising deal that would launch Sweet Amelia's bakery locations nationwide while keeping the original company firmly in my control. The financial terms were incredible. Guaranteed royalty payments, expansion support, marketing budgets I could never have afforded on my own. It was everything I wanted without giving up what I had built. The day I signed the contract, I sat in my lawyer's office and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pure, uncomplicated joy. I had done it. I had taken my dream and turned it into something bigger than I had ever imagined, and I had done it on my own terms. No family interference, no compromise. Just my vision, my work, my success. I didn't tell my family immediately. I sat with the news for a few days, enjoying the private knowledge of just how wrong they had been about me. But eventually, the news broke publicly. The press release went out. The business journals picked it up. Local news covered it. Within 24 hours, everyone knew that Sweet Amelia's bakery was going nationwide. My phone exploded. Congratulations from friends, interview requests from media, messages from customers, and of course, messages from my family. Dozens of them. My father wanted to discuss the business implications. My mother was so proud. Marcus had networking ideas. Diane had real estate contacts. They all wanted in. Again. Still. Always. I ignored every single message from them and focused on the work ahead. The franchising rollout was aggressive but manageable. Locations would open steadily over the next few years, each one carefully selected, properly trained, held to the same quality standards I had established from the beginning. I was involved in every aspect: training programs, quality control, brand consistency. It was exhausting and exhilarating and exactly what I wanted to be doing. Sophie had been promoted to operations director, overseeing all retail locations. James was now head of product development, ensuring every franchise maintained our quality standards. Mrs. Monroe had joined my board of directors, providing the wisdom and guidance that had been instrumental in my success. I had built a real team, a real family of choice. 6 months into the franchise expansion, something happened that I didn't see coming. My father filed a lawsuit, not against me personally this time, against the company. He claimed that he had provided emotional and financial support during my formative years that directly contributed to my business success. That his guidance, however I might have perceived it, had value. That he deserved compensation for his contribution to what I had become. It was absurd. It was desperate. And it was about to blow up in his face spectacularly. The lawsuit hit the news immediately. Family Sue's Bakery Empire Founder was the headline. My lawyer assured me it was baseless, that we would win easily. But the damage to my reputation was already happening. People were questioning the origin story, wondering if maybe my family had a point, doubting the narrative of the self-made success. It was exactly what my father wanted. If he couldn't profit from my success, he would try to destroy it. I made a decision that morning that some people thought was reckless. I decided to fight back publicly. I called a press conference. My PR team thought I was crazy. My lawyer advised against it. But I knew my family. I knew their tactics. And I knew the only way to beat them was to expose them completely. Mrs. Monroe stood by my decision, offering her support and encouragement. The press conference was packed. Journalists, cameras, microphones everywhere. I stood at the podium, looked directly into the cameras, and told my story. I told them about 6 years of saving every penny while my family mocked my dreams. I told them about making hundreds of custom desserts for free while being told they weren't good enough. I told them about the opening day they deliberately ignored. I showed documentation of my financial independence. I showed bank records proving every investment in my business came from my own money. I destroyed their narrative with facts, documentation, and brutal honesty. My father claims he contributed to my success, I said. He's right. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment of doubt he planted in my mind contributed to my success. Because every time he told me I would fail, I worked harder to prove him wrong. So yes, he contributed, just not in the way he thinks he deserves to be compensated for. The room was silent. Then someone started clapping, then another. Within seconds, the entire press conference was applauding. The interview went viral. Not just local news, national news, social media. Everyone was talking about it. The narrative shifted completely. I wasn't being sued by family. I was a victim of family exploitation, trying to cash in on success they never supported. The public sympathy was overwhelming. My family's reputation was destroyed overnight. Local businesses refused to work with them. My father's consulting business dried up. Marcus lost clients. Diane's real estate career tanked. They had tried to hurt me and ended up hurting themselves. The lawsuit was dismissed within 2 weeks. The judge cited lack of evidence and called the claim frivolous. My father was ordered to pay my legal fees. It was a complete victory. But I wasn't done. I filed a countersuit. Harassment, defamation, attempted sabotage. I documented every vandalism attempt that police couldn't formally solve, but I knew they were behind. Every fake review, every malicious rumor, every action they had taken to try to destroy my business. My lawyer smiled when she saw the evidence I had compiled. "This is going to be fun," she said. The countersuit terrified them. My father called me directly, something he hadn't done in months. "Amelia, please," he said, his voice different, smaller. "We can work this out. Family shouldn't fight like this." "You're right," I agreed. "Family shouldn't, but you taught me that we stopped being family a long time ago. The moment you chose to bet on my failure instead of support my dreams. I made mistakes," he admitted. "We all did, but this lawsuit will destroy us. Financially, professionally, socially. Is that really what you want?" I thought about that question. Did I want to destroy them? A year ago, maybe I would have said no. I would have found some way to forgive, to compromise, to maintain the relationship, but not anymore. "What I want," I said slowly, "is for you to understand consequences. You tried to take my business. You tried to ruin my reputation. You tried to steal my success. Now you get to face the results of those choices. Please," he said again, "there must be something we can do, some way to settle this." I considered. "Drop all claims, sign legal documents promising never to interfere with my business again, public apology acknowledging your actions, and stay out of my life, permanently." The silence on the other end was long. "And if we do that, you'll drop the countersuit?" "I'll consider it," I replied. "But the decision will be mine, just like everything else in my life." They agreed to my terms. The public apology was humiliating for them, exactly as intended. They admitted to the harassment attempts, the rumors, everything. It was published in local newspapers, shared on social media, made permanent public record. Their reputation was in ruins. I dropped the countersuit after they complied with everything, not because I forgave them, but because I was done. I had proven my point. I had protected my business. I had won. And now I wanted to move forward without them dragging behind me like chains. The final piece of closure came in an unexpected form. A letter from my father. Not an email, not a text. An actual handwritten letter. It arrived at my office 6 months after the lawsuits were settled. "Amelia," it read, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to respond to this letter. But I need you to know that I understand now what I did to you. I spent so long believing that my failure in business meant I understood business. I projected my insecurities onto you. I tried to prevent you from succeeding because your success highlighted my failure. That was wrong. You deserved support. You deserved belief. You deserved family. I'm sorry I couldn't give you that. I'm sorry for everything. I hope someday you can be happy, even if I'm not part of that happiness. Dad." I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and went back to work. Maybe someday that letter would mean something. Maybe someday I would be ready to forgive. But that day wasn't today. Today, I had an empire to run. 3 years after opening my first bakery, at 31 years old, Sweet Amelia's had grown beyond anything I had imagined. 38 franchise locations across the country, with more in development, a thriving wholesale business, a line of packaged products in major grocery stores, revenue in the tens of millions. I had achieved success on a scale that would have seemed impossible when I was working double shifts at Monroe's Cafe. But more than the financial success, I had built something I was proud of. Every bakery maintained the quality standards I had established. Every employee was trained in the values I believed in. Every customer experience reflected the care and attention I had put into the original location. I had scaled my vision without compromising it. That was the real achievement. My personal life had changed too. I had bought a beautiful house in a neighborhood I loved. I had traveled to places I had only dreamed about. I had donated to causes that mattered to me. I had established a scholarship fund for culinary students from low-income families. I was using my success to create opportunities for others the way Mrs. Monroe had created opportunities for me. Mrs. Monroe herself had become like family to me, the real kind of family, the kind that showed up, that supported, that celebrated successes and helped through failures. She was at every major milestone, every ribbon cutting, every award ceremony. When I asked her to be on the board of directors for Sweet Amelia's, she cried. "I always knew you would do something special," she said. "I just didn't know how special." Sophie and James had become true partners in the business. Sophie oversaw all retail operations as VP of Operations. James managed product development and quality control as Chief Product Officer. They had earned their positions through talent and loyalty. They were living proof that surrounding yourself with the right people was just as important as having the right vision. My family, meanwhile, had faded into background noise. I occasionally heard updates through mutual acquaintances. My father had retired early. Marcus had moved to another state and was working in middle management somewhere. Diane had left real estate and was working a corporate job. My mother spent her time with her book club and avoided talking about me. They had become strangers, and I was okay with that. One afternoon, 3 years and 2 months after opening day, I was visiting one of our franchise locations in the suburbs when I saw them, my entire family, walking into the bakery. For a moment, I considered leaving through the back, but curiosity got the better of me. I stayed behind the counter, watching. They didn't recognize me at first. I had changed, grown, carried myself differently. I wasn't the woman they had dismissed anymore. They approached the counter, looking at the menu board. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were customers now. If they wanted my desserts, they had to buy them like everyone else. "Can I help you?" the employee asked. My father ordered a coffee and a croissant. My mother ordered tea and a scone. Marcus and Diane ordered various pastries. They pulled out their wallets. They paid. They received their orders. I stepped out from behind the counter. "Welcome to Sweet Amelia's," I said. They froze. My father's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. My mother's eyes went wide. Marcus and Diane just stared. "Amelia," my father finally said. "We didn't know you were here." "I own the place," I replied with a slight smile. "I visit our locations regularly." An awkward silence fell. They looked at their purchased items, the full-price items they had just paid for, items that they used to demand for free, items they used to criticize, items that were now successful enough to be sold in nearly 40 locations. "Everything looks wonderful," my mother said quietly. "It is," I agreed. "We've maintained very high standards. Every location, every product, consistent quality. We're very proud of what you've accomplished," my father said. The words sounded genuine, but I had heard too many of his performances to be moved. "Thank you," I said simply. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" They shook their heads. They took their purchases and found a table in the corner. They sat there eating my desserts, in my bakery, surrounded by my success. I watched them for a moment, feeling nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just nothing. They were strangers eating pastries in one of my franchises. I went back to work, meeting with the location manager, reviewing operations, checking quality. When I looked over again, they were gone. They had left their trash on the table. Even now, even after everything, they couldn't be bothered to clean up after themselves. I walked over, cleared their table, and threw their trash away. It felt symbolic somehow, cleaning up their mess one final time. That night, I sat in my office at the original bakery location, the one that started everything. I thought about the journey, the struggles, the betrayals, the victories. I thought about the woman I had been, desperate for family approval, and the woman I had become, needing no one's approval but my own. I had built something beautiful, not just a business, but a life filled with people who genuinely cared about me. Mrs. Monroe, Sophie, James, my employees, my customers, my real family, the family I chose, and that was enough. That was more than enough. If this story resonated with you, Make sure to like and subscribe. Share your own stories of overcoming family doubt in the comments below. Remember, the people who truly believe in you will show up when it matters, and the ones who don't, they'll end up paying full price at your franchise locations. Thank you for being here for this journey. Now go out there and build something beautiful, regardless of who doubts you. Because at the end of the day, the only approval you need is your own.